Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. As you might imagine, the most talked about topic in my office is relationships. To paraphrase a great quote, relationships are one of life's biggest predictors of our happiness or our misery. Yet, as we all know, relationships can be super challenging and they tend to require practice, humility, patience, and learning. Worse still, we can easily get in our own way and sabotage our love connections by using our voices in ways that we think will protect us, only to discover that we've actually broken a bridge rather than strengthened it. Fortunately, relationship therapy has come a long way, and many thought leaders have helped move the ball forward with exceptional insights and tips. One of the most inspiring models for relationship therapy I have ever seen comes from the field of internal family systems, also known as IFS. At first, understanding IFS may seem daunting, but by the time you're done with this episode, I'm confident you'll have a good basic grasp of the model and how it can help you in your relationships. My brilliant guest, Toni Herbine-Blank, is a relationship therapist who found a way to weave the IFS model in a way to help couples connect more fully. She calls the model intimacy from the inside out, and I love it. She is also the co-author of 2 books on how to perform this type of relationship therapy, and she trains therapists all over the world in this model. So listen in as Toni and I talk about how to get out of your own way and to enjoy intimacy from the inside out. Toni Herbine-Blank, welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you for having me.
I'm just delighted to be with you, and I have been geeking out to your book, The Manual for Therapists Who Want to Learn How to Practice IFIO, also known as Intimacy from the Inside Out. It is one of the most sophisticated approaches to couples therapy I've ever come across. I'm an absolute lover of couples therapy, as evidenced by some of my former guests, and the fact that I really care about our loving relationships, our intimate relationships, and the fact that you came up with an internal family systems model for couples therapy, something I didn't even know existed until I did, and never shall I see couples therapy the same again, because this has really blown my mind. First off, before we even get into it, even though we've had a couple exposures to IFS, internal family systems, in a brief word or two, could you explain what internal family systems is before we get into IFIO, your creation?
So internal family systems therapy, which was developed by Dick Schwartz, who you've had on this podcast. The premise being that all human beings are multipled in personality, so have many aspects of personality that can be worked with and in relationship like they are people, even though they're not people, lest anyone get confused by that. That we can, and each individual, and then if you're working with them clinically, can interact with them like they're human beings because they respond like human beings do. And it's obviously not the only multiplicity model around. And I think it's getting more and more popular, but back in the day, it wasn't so popular. And one of the geniuses of Dick Schwartz is he developed this model based on what he heard his clients say. So he never let go of that. This is collaborative. My clients are telling me this. I'm going to believe them instead of pathologize them, which is a beautiful thing. And then he also began to discover through the voices of his clients that there was something else other than aspects of personality, which is this thing that he coined self. There are lots of definitions for self. And his clients started talking to him about that. This is different. This is not a part. This is me. This is my essence. This is my wisdom. This is my true self. And he began using that energy of self in relationship to the parts of his clients. And that's how the model began to form.
I think that's genius. And I'm so grateful. I love thinking of family systems as being almost like a sports team or an orchestra or even the Senate, and imagining various parts with different voices. And we want an organizing, perhaps a conductor of the orchestra or the coach of the sports team, or perhaps the president to be the voice, and one of these voices to go rogue and suddenly call the plays from the field in spite of the fact that the self should be calling the plays. Seems like one of the things that you do both with individuals and with couples is to help them get the self, the smartest part, the truest part of who they are, to be the voice rather than one of these rogue parts to kind of dictate what's going to happen in their life or in their relationship.
That term, which is unblending, and the reason I'm saying that is because we may talk a lot about that during this interview, this idea that we can differentiate on the inside and listen to all those voices and honor all those voices and help them stay connected internally so they don't go rogue. It's a lot easier said than actually doing, but it's an important aspect of both the IFS model and this model that was born out of IFS, obviously, is how to help people differentiate who's speaking.
And the idea of unblending, which we'll get into more, I'm sure, is so crucial because so many of us are misled by this idea that, well, I can't help it. This is who I am. This is what I think. And it's actually, that's a part of you, but there are other parts, and that part doesn't need to be heard, which I'm sure we'll get into. But before we do, let's talk about your invention, which I love, IFIO, intimacy from the inside out. Can you describe how you came up with this idea, and what is IFIO?
So I want to give credit where credit is due first, again, to Dick Schwartz, who, when I was in my basic training many, many years ago, over 20 years ago, we learned about the 3 protocols that he developed working with couples. When I was learning those at that time, I said to him, this is complex, and I think we should make this more easily accessible to therapists. These protocols that you're teaching us, and add more to them, and then create a program where therapists could actually learn this because it's so nuanced. I want to say that this intimacy from the inside out came out of some concepts that Dick was already using with couples. And I'm trying to remember where I came up with intimacy from the inside out. I think, if I remember myself correctly, that when I started thinking about teaching therapists what I do or what I was doing, I had to figure out how to articulate it. So I was thinking, this model is a model of differentiation, and where we say we're going to help people connect on the inside first. So we are going to help people learn to have a relationship with themselves inside before they keep attempting to do something that they keep failing at. As a couple therapist, I was noticing I was working with this was pre-IFS, people with extreme situations, I'll say that, with extreme parts. And I started to notice they can't do this connecting, bonding, creating safety for each other while they're busy hating themselves. And I remember saying that to myself, this isn't going to work. They have these experiences in my office, which I don't minimize, but they can't hold on to it because what happens is the self-loathing gets all churned up between sessions and they go back into these dances that are so painful. So I said to myself, okay, we need to start with intimacy inside before outside. So that's kind of the evolution of it.
I think that is brilliant. And many people walk around saying you can only love another as much as you love yourself. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that statement is, but there's got to be some truth to it. And it seems like that is part of where that idea even comes from, but more in action. And you've actually gone beyond just, a pithy statement. You've actually come up with ways for us to access intimacy from within. And I'm wondering, what does intimacy from the inside actually look like? What does it sound like? If you were to describe intimacy from the inside, what is it and how do we attain it?
if I or we can develop a loving relationship with all of who we are. I mean, imagine that all of who we are could be accepted and loved and known and understood internally first. That creates internal intimacy or internal security, internal attachment, you could even say. We say sometimes when we're teaching that those aspects of us that have been exiled or pushed to the side or blamed and shamed for so many years begin to be brought home into the heart of ourselves. That's an intimate connection. And in IFS, one of the basic principles is that all parts have an inherent gift, but that they weren't a lot of these protective defenses, these parts that are reactive and defensive, harsh, disappearing, avoiding, all of those parts have a gift. And if we can help understand how they got into the position in the internal system, how they got into those jobs, those roles, or those positions, we can help them let go of the burden of those roles and responsibilities. So that's a tenet of IFS.
And it's almost like they just want to be heard and seen. Is what I'm kind of
known.
And known. Mm-hmm.
And it's counterintuitive to invite more of what everybody doesn't like.
Totally.
But, our experience, IFS therapists, IFIO therapists do understand that if those parts can be seen, known, and understood, there's a much better chance they're going to relax. And of course, in couple therapy or relationship therapy, a partner not that interested in that.
Totally.
Our partners don't usually say, wow, that was me. Tell me more.
I want to know more about that part.
Yeah, until they understand the bigger picture. Why taking a pause and asking somebody close to you to tell you more is a powerful move in couple therapy or in relationship therapy.
You said something so compelling, and that is, it's so counterintuitive for the partner to get curious and not furious about their couple's ugly parts. That ugly part is not going away, probably ever in any way, shape, or form, except it could be perhaps relaxed, to your point, and it definitely needs to be heard, which is really goes, it's almost as counterintuitive as when we're skidding our car. What we're taught in driver's ed is steer into the skid, which our bodies say no to. And yet it's kind of like shadow information, kind of to borrow from a Jungian concept where we have these lesser loved parts that absolutely need to be known. And the only way out is through knowing these parts. And so here you are as the couple therapist or the relationship therapist, asking each person to patiently and quietly listen to the parts of the other person. And I'm wondering about the reactivity component. I mean, it's very hard to create space, I would think, for, let's say, the injured party, so to speak. One could say both parties are injured in some way, shape, or form in relationship therapy, but to listen to the ugly part or the exile, to use your term, the exiled part who has no place. How do you help create space so that people will be able to share that part and to listen to that part for both parties?
And I think this is the essence. The question you're asking is, this is really the essence of the therapy in some ways, is how to help people break a pattern of communication that has gone on for so long and is so painful, because these parts, as we were talking about earlier, take over and they try to run the show. And then there's no affect regulation, windows of tolerance are closed. All that protective energy is going directly at the other person, and that person can't hear. The minute one of those parts starts directing its energy directly at the other person's protective system is going to engage. So what we say here is, before any of that happens, before you start this conversation, we're going to create a safe, brave, courageous container to do that, which includes unblending, again, differentiating and learning how to speak for your experience instead of from your experience, from that angry, reactive part, right? All experiences, all feelings, valid and could become welcome if people learn a different way of speaking and listening.
Wow. As you're saying that, I almost imagine the for and not from is almost having, and please correct me if I've got this wrong, but it's almost like we've hired someone to speak on the behalf, like the Lorax speaking on behalf of the trees. The trees are not speaking, but the Lorax is in this case. But it's almost like we're hiring representation to speak for the part so that the part can be heard, but we're not speaking necessarily from that part.
Yeah. And especially in the beginning where people have had a lot of experience being on the receiving end of a really painful communication. And so now they're really not available. So when we're teaching people how to do this, we start with the listening person. And you'll hear some imago similarities here. This is not one of them, but the dialogue, I'm big on dialogue. I am a huge proponent of helping people learn how to communicate because couples, people in relationship need a way to have hard conversations. We all do. But we start with helping the person listening get unafraid. That's the very first thing we do is information is going to be coming. So we're going to work with your body. We're going to work with your parts. We're going to work with your emotions to help you get ready to listen about somebody else's experience, not the truth about you. And it takes some time to do that, in my experience, in the beginning.
Oh, my goodness, yes. One of the things that I'm still working on in life is not taking things personally. And you're speaking to that experience beautifully. Like we start with the body, we breathe, we have some cognitive awarenesses that can help us be more present when the other person is sharing their version of the truth, not the truth, but their experience. And perhaps from a part that is not pleasant, that they came upon honestly. I love the idea that these parts have served a purpose. Even if they seem very counterproductive at this stage in life, they probably evolved from a very honest place. And they are now providing insulation from rather than intimacy with a relationship. If this were a Family Feud game, I would say that one of the top survey answers would have to be, I'm going to teach my partner a lesson. They cannot treat me this way. And I'm just going to say, screw you, I'm going home. Some theme and variation. Can we talk about that phenomenon?
Speaking of Terry Real, I read somewhere in one of his books, him saying he doesn't use parts language, or he didn't back then. But, we try to teach our partners something like this. We try to teach our partners a lesson by hurting them the way we think they've hurt us. Or we try to get our partners to listen by taking a 2x4 to their head. And I thought, this is so right. And that also comes from years and years of frustration, not being heard. They don't know how to speak and listen well. So it's years and years of buildup until I'm so sore inside. Now I'm going to make you sore, and that's going to get you to love me better.
Entirely. My vitriol is going to create so much more love.
That's right. That's right. And on a really good day, after you've done some work, sometimes that works, but more often than not, it just perpetuates the dance, right? It perpetuates the cycle of reaction, counter-reaction, reaction, counter-reaction. So we want to help people change their conversation. I really believe if people can change their conversation, they will radically change their relationships. I believe that's inside and out. And I believe that the more intimate and connected we can feel with ourselves, the easier that process is going to become, so that one day when your partner is in a foul mood, you can stay connected on the inside and say, okay, I really do want to hear about this. Then took that term co-regulation, which is I'm going to keep my nervous system calm. I'm going to keep my heart open. I'm going to stay in self, and you can be a knucklehead and I'll stay with you.
Like if you were to come up with anywhere between 1 and 5 basic bullet points to stay embodied or connected while somebody else is not regulated, while somebody else is losing their shit, so to speak.
Yeah.
How do we do that? What would be your advice?
Right. I will tell you. And I learned this from horses, by the way, which is something I talk a lot about in the trainings, is the first thing is a pause. Being willing to pause and say, we're going to take a minute. I'm going to listen to you, but I need to be with myself for a second. So a pause. And then we have these terms in IFS and IFIO that are not specific. People use these terms all the time, but U-turn to return, which is I'm going to go in first and I'm just going to...
That's the U-turn?
Yeah, I'm going to take this minute to listen to myself, reassure my parts. This is okay. You're my beloved. I can be here with you. Hold my belly, take a breath, and then return and say, okay, I can hold on here. I can stay regulated. I can stand blended, and I'll let you know if I can't. So that's one, a pause, a U-turn, and then being able to say in a kind way when you need to make a boundary.
I love that. So a pause, taking a breath, a U-turn, turning into myself first, just reminding myself who I'm with and that I love this person. A return
if that's true. If that's true.
If that's true. Right. Since we're talking about intimate relationships, I hope that there's some love in the mix. And then the return to the partner in terms of returning my energy kind of almost when ready. And then there was something else that you said, and that was
being able to make a boundary. So in other words, if it's getting too intense, without shaming the person who's speaking, if that's possible. And again, this is a process over time. I don't want anyone to think that this is like, oh, here it is.
Toni just taught me how to do it. I should be able to do it immediately.
I'll do it when I get home.
I got this.
But to be able to say no in a loving way, which is, I'm getting you. And now I notice I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. So I need to take another pause. I need to take another break. And the person speaking won't necessarily like that. And that's okay. I think it's so hard for people to think I'm going to do a good thing and then my partner's going to respond beautifully. Sometimes we don't like the boundary, or sometimes we don't like it because we're all taken over by a part.
Totally.
But to be able to say, I can't listen anymore, but I'll come back and I'll listen more at another time. So kind boundary, not a, okay, you're cut off now.
That is such an important distinction.
Right.
And can you elaborate on what a kind boundary could even sound like so that people might be able to execute on that?
My experience working with people with boundaries, especially if they haven't had any or didn't know what they were, they get strong, they get mean, if I may say. The boundary setting part is a part that says sometimes I've had enough and I'm not taking it anymore.
Yeah, it's a protector almost.
Yeah, as opposed to, I'm noticing that my system can't really handle any more information. So telling the truth, but in a way that your partner can receive it, potentially, and also not abandoning. So a healthy boundary is malleable. It's porous. We can change our mind. We can come back to what we were talking about. But right now, I need to take care of myself so that I can listen more. Not I've had enough of you now, which is the impulse, I think, for a lot of those protectors is I don't want to listen to you anymore. So bye-bye.
Yep. So it sounds more like, sweetie, I need to take care of myself for a moment. We'll come back with intention of being able to listen more fully,
right,
but I just need a moment.
Perfect.
Versus, hey, my therapist told me I'm important too. Screw you. You come back to me when you're ready to talk, right, or something like that. Right.
I want to just throw in here, if I can, is that one of the things that we're doing in our training is really becoming interculturally competent more and more.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm sitting with couples who, are different than me or different from each other, this idea of boundaries or anything really is we ask, we don't tell in this model. We really want to collaborate with people. So I'm always pretty careful to say, we need to find out what works in communication for people and what doesn't, because there are people who can get very fiery and loud, and that's okay with them. That is not a problem. So I just want to put that caveat in
Such
here.
Such a great point.
Yeah.
And that it really goes with more like with the platinum rule or the golden rule or some widespread paintbrush. It's
right.
That there's nuance. I'm outing myself here. I was watching Emily in Paris, and I was watching how Sylvie, one of the French characters, was responding to a thing with great passion and in a way that no American could ever say. And it was just taken in stride because there was a cultural context to the way she was responding. And I think you're speaking to that phenomenon to some extent.
And that there are people who feel like they're always getting told to stop being so angry when they're being passionate or they're being adamant or they need to stay protective for a variety of cultural reasons. But I think the point is once we know what works and what doesn't, then we can come back to the very thing that I'm talking about, which is unblending, windows of tolerance open, speaking for what's going on may lead to an easier communication.
So it's interesting that you use the word passionate. And I wouldn't want that to be a hall pass for somebody who's being abusive, because I actually worked with a very abusive individual who said, I'm not abusive, I'm just passionate. And it's like, actually, if you listen to the kinds of critical and hostile messages, you're actually torching the ground. That's not passion. That's Dante-esque. But,
or what is the feedback your partner is giving?
Right.
So if this hurts, it hurts.
Yeah. And then hurt people, which is another truth, I think. I mean, when you were describing that hurt part, saying, I'm going to teach you a lesson from my hurt part so that you hurt just as much as I do. I believe there are certainly a lot of rock and roll lyrics that really kind of corroborate that notion. I'm going to hurt you the way you hurt me. I'm wondering, I love even being able to consider IFS a second language. Many of the practitioners will speak in a way that may be a little different. And I'm guessing many of the people who receive IFS treatment may find themselves speaking about their parts in a way that would be kind of foreign to somebody who did not quite get the memo. And yet I would think it would be very empowering both to the practitioner and to I guess both are practitioners, whether they're clients of it or practicing it, just we're all practicing it. How have you noticed your own relationship to self evolve with this awareness, this linguistic awareness that IFS provides?
Well, I've been doing it for a very long time, and it makes a lot of sense to me, even though in the beginning it didn't. I wasn't one of those people that just fell in love with the model. I struggled a bit with it. I actually was my clients that I said, all right, I'm going to try this. This was way back before IFIO and IFS, and people responded to it so beautifully. And I saw the power of that internal differentiation. So then my belief in the process grew and grew and grew. And I knew that if I was going to learn this, I was going to have to start doing it immediately because it was foreign, really. So I found an IFS therapist and I just started working with my own system. And I just noticed the first thing, how my relationship with myself changed just by doing that, just by learning about unblending and listening to some aspect of myself that had been rejected by me or other parts of me for so long, and seeing the beauty in hearing what this part was about and a history and their role and what they were up to and why. So I just started doing the process and noticing that I was feeling differently about myself over time. And the other thing that I noticed that was really powerful is that in interactions that were difficult for any variety of reasons, if I listened to myself while I was listening to the other person, which is possible actually, paying attention to sensation, feelings, impulses, really paying attention to that, I could stay more present with the other person. It wasn't quite as threatening or scary when I could stay grounded, connected. That's another way to say it. Regulated, that's another way to say it. So the more I did it, the more I did, and the more I found ways to be able to stay unblended, keep my heart open. And not all the time, of course, but that's the journey, really, open-hearted living. And this is one way. I really do think that IFS and intimacy from the inside out is a journey toward open-hearted living. I really do.
And a big part of open-hearted living, I think it's kind of a bidirectional arrow that the more open our heart, is, the more open our ears can be. And I would think that you've seen in IFIO people's hearts and ears open up far more readily. And I'm wondering what gets in the way of really hearing your partner, and what can be done about that, and what are the effects of listening?
I would say, being a couple therapist as long as I have, that the thing that gets in the way is shame. Shamefulness and shaming, inner shamefulness and inner shaming. That's a dynamic that goes on internally. And then learning as children that shaming other people is a way to protect ourselves. I see it everywhere. So did Brene Brown.
Love her.
That the self-loathing is the biggest deterrent to people being able to speak and listen to each other, and for all different kinds of reasons, but it's threatening. So the heart closes, our hearts close down when we believe that somebody else's experience is personal to us. You were just saying that, learning to not take things personally, I think.
So hard, but yes.
So hard. Right. And sometimes they are personal. So I always look at the iceberg of communication, I say, which is all of that protective interactions is above the water. What you did yesterday, what you did in the beginning of the relationship, all the little built up hurts. But then what's not getting talked about is what's underneath the surface, which is the wounding from childhood, the pain and suffering that people have experienced over time. All the tenderness, all the wounding, all the implicit memory that's not in the mind yet. And people think that the conversations that they're having on the surface of the water, the tip of the iceberg, is the real conversation. And we start that work of, we're going to go inside and do some healing internally, so that these conversations that you're really trying to have about the difficulties that are real and present in your relationship can be had without being infiltrated with all of your history. Does that make sense?
100%. It even resonates with my body as you're speaking.
So if I'm in a conversation with my partner and he says something that taps into an old wound of mine, then I start feeling the same way I did back then. And then my protectors are going to start scrambling on how to project onto my partner that he's the bad one, because I don't want to feel all that.
100%. So let's get into the protectors, because some people who are listening may not have heard that term quite yet.
Okay.
What is a protector, and what's a protector?
They are our loyalist soldiers. Not that everyone loves that word soldier, but
though.
The protectors are those parts that develop to manage shame and internal suffering. So if we think about all of the things that come at little people, starting the minute our feet hit the ground and maybe even before, depending on what you believe.
Trauma, sure, or epigenetics.
And then we start to develop a protective system to try to handle the discomfort. And different children in different circumstances will have more resilience for all different reasons. And so the protectors will develop based on the level of wounding. This is what we believe here. So that the bigger the trauma, potentially the bigger the protector will be.
So if I was bullied in high school, my protectors may engage in the corporate arena saying, no one will ever bully me again. And I may, in fact, become the bully in service of not being bullied. And that's maybe perhaps the arc of a protector.
That's it right there. Something was done to me. I start doing it to myself, consciously or unconsciously, and then I will do it to others. That's part of the shame cycle there. And then we start projecting that it's only being done to us, or I'm only doing it to myself. It's hard to take a look at, I'm doing the very thing that I'm projecting onto you that you're doing to me. So that's a slow process in couple therapy and not anything that I introduce early on, but it's an important part of it.
Yeah. And a few pithy rhyming statements. You got to name it to tame it. You got to feel it to heal it. I think these are apropos of our conversation. And Zach Gottlieb, who is the son of Lori, who wrote Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, has come up with a slogan of, we can't heal what we don't talk about. And it feels like those kind of three slogans, name to tame, feel to heal, we can't heal what we don't talk about. It feels like those are really in the epicenter of what it is that you do with clients in IFIO.
And also, are you talking to yourself? When I think about inside and out, I think about those discussions where we say to a partner, you're never there for me. And I will hold lightly in my mind, I wonder how well you are there for yourself. I say that, I hold it lightly about the person.
Who's making that declaration? The person who says to his or her partner, you're never there for me. And you ask yourself as the clinician, I wonder how much you're there for yourself.
I do. And then I might do that exploration really respectfully and kindly. That's part of a U-turn. We say, if someone is blaming an intimate other, we don't go to the intimate other and say, what do you think about that? Are they speaking the truth about you? We say to the complainant, as it were.
I like that word, the complainant.
We say, I'm not going to go to your partner right now. I'm going to ask you to get curious about what is coming up for you, inside you. So we're going to listen inside you first to understand the impact of your experience of whatever it is that the other person is doing. So we most often, so if you were to say to me, well, I'm tired of never being da-da-da-da-da-da, I would say, well, let's take a closer look at what that means inside you. What's coming up when your partner does this or that? What comes up inside of you? Also, the other thing that I would say to you, which I'm not going to, but I'll just illuminate it here, is, can you see the relationship between the bullied boy and the not enough and the protector that says,
oh, yes.
And so we talk about a pairing. This is a neurological thing. We talk about a pairing between protection and vulnerability. And can we be in relationship with that relationship first? And then at some point, have a conversation with your partner about what gets stirred up for you in these dynamics, so that your partner is hearing about what's underneath the water of the iceberg, and not only from that protective part that is making them bad and wrong.
Pairing between protector and vulnerability, that's absolutely brilliant. And one of the things that you're speaking about is the antidote to shame, which is self-compassion. And I'm so grateful to people like Krista Neff and Chris Germer, who have brilliantly brought that to the surface, and can't help but believe that IFIO is one of the best tools for cultivating self-compassion, because once we see our parts for what they are and how they may have helped us get here, but obviously it's not going to help us get where we want to get. As we were going through this, I got to tell you, I was having this memory of being in high school, thinking like a lot of kids do, like maybe someday I'll be a rock star like somebody in Led Zeppelin, and then I will have the rough equivalent of carte blanche. I'll be able to go anywhere and everyone will love me. And one of the things that we hear, by the way, if you listen to interviews with people who had this belief and then got it, is that it's so anticlimactic and so hollow in terms of the victory. Like, they aren't getting any of that. Conan O'Brien describes going home and his kid's just like, yeah, hey, dad. And he's not revered as the great Conan O'Brien at home. He's just dad and nothing all that special. And they're not all that interested in his work. They're, interested in their video games or whatever they're interested in. And I find that really amazing how we misattribute an outcome, a future outcome, as going to be the panacea that we so deeply crave, when it's, in fact, it's a greater connection with ourself and a greater connection to other, in the way that you're basically help cultivate in your individuals and couples.
And I love that you brought up self-compassion as the antidote, because I believe that. Self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and safe self-disclosure, I would say, are the big ones for healing shame. And I really do believe, and I'm biased, of course, but IFS offers all those things to people around healing shame, because the unblending, the self-to-part connection is all about self-compassion. All of it. It's all about that. It's about compassion. clarity, kindness, patience, open-heartedness toward yourself. So to me, it is the antidote,
And I love the phrase that you used, and I've never heard it before, actually. Maybe it's your own or maybe it's commonly used, but I'm going to say it again because it was so good. Safe self-disclosure. Safe self-disclosure. I was reading about secrets and how the most toxic element is marinating in shame, marinating in these ruminations about, I can't tell this to anyone. And even I can't hear it myself, about myself. Safe self-disclosure. Oh, what a just fantastic term.
Because this idea that telling your story is so important. And maybe I heard it from Brene Brown. I don't know. Maybe it came out of my gut. Maybe there's nothing new in the universe, right? But
maybe there is. I like the idea.
But when people get an urge, one part decides that it's going to speak about another part, and it does it in a context that is not a safe place. There's a lot of backlash as a result of that, big time. So I think when we talk about telling our stories and revealing what's happened to us is one of the ways out of shame, you have to pick and choose where that's going to be. I believe. That's what I believe.
Agreed. I'm going to ask you my final fantastical question, Toni. If somehow you had the magical powers to confer upon all people one skill or insight that would dramatically improve their life, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would impact their lives as individuals, as well as perhaps even society at large?
What came up first, and probably tonight I'll be saying, oh, why didn't you say this? And why didn't you say that? But this real conversation we've been having, a lot of it is about self-love, about being able to be in relationship with all of who you are, healing shame, unburdening. That's a word we use in the IFS universe and IFIO, learning to let go of those messages of I'm bad, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, there's something wrong with me. And learning the skill, whether it's through mindfulness or IFS or courses or helping the planet, whatever it is that we as human beings can do to learn to love ourselves, learn to open our hearts and be able to extend that externally. I think that's life-changing, planet-changing. So that's what I would say. That's planet healing in the environment, everything living, and I do think that it is enhanced through learning to love all of who we are. And that is not an easy fix. I mean, that's not just something we do because we say we should practice. It's a practice. And I do think that this work is one way. Not all therapy models fit for every human being, but I do believe that if it resonates, this is a method. That's the journey, really.
Toni, I love that wish. And lest the listener think that in any way, shape, or form it would lead to narcissism or grandiosity. No, it actually leads to all good outcomes from where I sit. To that original point of being able to love from the inside and being able to love on the outside, that it really does start from within. Although I love that you saw it as kind of a synergistic in and out, although you weren't able to incorporate it into the letters of IFIS.
No, it's stuck. It's stuck. It's there to stay.
Well, this has been a blast. I've been looking so forward to just getting into this with you. And I'm so grateful for what you've brought to our field.
Well, thank you so much.
You as well. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.